Thanks again for listening, and join us in building up the kingdom by sharing Pod Apostle with a friend.
So the last line of the gospel is, you cannot serve both God and mammon. And what is mammon? Mammon is the god of money, okay? And so we have this setup in the gospel for us where this man is caught being a dishonest steward. He's going to be punished by being fired. And what does he do? He starts giving away his master's money. Basically, he's allowing the people to write their bills out for less than they actually owe. So he's generous with somebody else's money, okay? There's a lot of people like that in the world. But nonetheless, we're to see this as a call to be good stewards of what's entrusted to us. That's one of the elements in the gospel. But another one is this horrible example of a boss. Because what I think is happening here, if we look beneath the surface, we have this guy who's stealing from his boss, and his boss catches him. And what's the first thing he says to him is, "Oh, you're acting prudently." And prudence is a virtue where you look forward to what's going to happen to you and you make proper decisions based on what you expect to happen. And I'm thinking, maybe the boss is a thief too, okay? And so it's like he understands what he's doing and why he's doing it. So we have a bad example and we have a bad employee, and it's just kind of a strange combination of events happening in the gospel. You cannot serve both God and the god of money. Another line from the gospel tonight was, the person who is trustworthy in small things is also trustworthy in great ones. The one who is dishonest in small things is also dishonest in great ones. Whether it's a small situation or a big deal, I would encourage you and myself that we have to have an internal, automatic, permanent disposition against any lying, cheating, stealing, even if it's just not a big deal, right? Because if we're not trustworthy and not a big deal, we're not trustworthy when it is a big deal. And that's a fact. Those are words right off the lips of Jesus Christ. So, if we're dishonest in small things, you know what? Life is full of small things. The big things don't happen all that often. So if we're dishonest in small things, we're dishonest. And if we're honest in small things, then we're honest. So inside of you and me, I would ask you to sincerely pray for a disposition that is against dishonesty, that is honest, that is against cheating, that recognizes fairness, and that's against lying, that tells the truth in small things and in big things. Satan is a liar and a murderer. And I think about Judas. Judas was one of the 12 apostles, right? And he ended up selling Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, betraying him, kissing him on the cheek, pretending he was his friend, all the while stabbing him in the back. Judas, you know what his first crime was? Not all of those horrible things. His first crime was just taking a little bit out of the collection plate. Just a little bit, I need it more than them, okay? So he started with little things. Now, diving back into this parable, and I know I said some of this already, but the dishonest steward decides that he's going to think about his future. And when he decides to think about his future, how does he plan to prepare for his future? By stealing from his boss some more. And unfortunately, it's somewhat natural to do what he did, to try to take advantage of his place while he can. Hey, I'm getting fired anyway. Let me kind of take advantage of the situation while I can. I hope and pray that's not our attitude. We should not be preparing for tomorrow as much as we need to be preparing for eternity. To think about our actions and our behaviors on an eternal scale, not in a natural order, but in the supernatural order. As followers of Jesus Christ, we're not allowed to lie, we're not allowed to steal, we're not allowed to cheat, even in small things. And I would pray that there would be an automatic disposition inside of us against those things. The gospel reminds us today to remember, to bring back together. I sometimes talk about this. What does it mean to dismember? To dismember means to take apart. To remember means to put back together, to make whole. And Jesus says, do this in what? Remembrance of me. Remember me. One of the reasons that we're here today at Mass is to remember Jesus Christ, to remember his love for us, to remember the saving grace that he has given us. To remember. What is? Are we only supposed to remember on Sundays? No. Every day, the church would ask us to get into the habit at some point, whether it's first thing in the morning or before we go to bed at night, to look at our lives. Many people that come to daily Mass, they come, and how do we begin Mass? Always by looking at our lives and remembering Jesus and asking for mercy and hoping that we're living a life in Christ. As followers of Jesus Christ, I pray that there is an automatic disposition inside of us, remembering that if we're honest in small things, then we're honest in big things. And if we're dishonest in small things, then we're dishonest in big things. A few years ago, I read a study by a guy named Dan Ariely. He was an economist. And Dan Ariely, the economist, worked at MIT, which is a very prestigious college. And he was very interested in how people would lie or cheat for their own economic advantage. So he decided to do a series of experiments on people to test them. He was interested in this phenomena of cheating for money. So he came up with a plan. 20 simple questions that anybody can answer, but they take a little while to answer, okay? You had 20 questions, and then he gave you a limited amount of time to answer the questions. And the average number that people answered was 4, okay? He tested a big group of people, and the prize was you get $1 for every one you get right here. Work as hard as you can. So they worked as hard as they could. 5 minutes later, how many answers? Typical number was how many? 4. Over and over again, 4, 4, 4. So he had his baseline, 4. So then the experiment goes like this. He says, now you get to grade your own paper, okay? So he gave them the same 5 minutes, the same test. That's different people taking it, but it's kind of the same pool of people. And lo and behold, they grade their own test. And how many is everybody getting right now? 7, okay? All right. So lo and behold, they're not being honest for their own material gain. So this is his whole experiment. And he theorized before he started this that there would be a few bad apples that cheated a whole lot. But what he figured out was there was a lot of people that did what? Cheated a little, okay? And he went on to theorize that what was happening was people wanted to look at themselves and feel good about themselves. They didn't want to look at themselves and see a cheater. So they figured, how much can I cheat and still feel good about myself and take advantage of this situation? Okay? Now this is human nature, y'all. This is your nature, okay? And so Jesus calls to call us above that nature. So it's typical human behavior to want just to cheat just a little bit if we can get away with it, but still not really consider ourselves cheaters. And so he labeled that little between 4 and 7, he labeled that the personal fudge factor, okay? What's your personal fudge factor? How much can you cheat and still feel like you're not a cheater? Now, then he went on to the next phase of the experiment. And the next phase of the experiment was to see if he could get people to cheat less. So what he did was he asked everybody, before they got their 5 minutes to take their test and grade it themselves, he asked everybody to spend a couple of minutes remembering and writing down the 10 Commandments. Okay, so everybody, first thing you do, spend a couple minutes writing down the 10 Commandments. The next thing you do, you take your 20-question test. The next thing you do, you grade your 20-question test and get your money. What do you think happened? Nobody cheated. Nobody cheated. As soon as they remembered, as soon as they called to mind a moral standard, they quit cheating. Then, I'm going to keep going. I find this fascinating. It's one of the reasons I got a degree in psychology, how people think and how they work, and spirituality. So then the next phase in the experiment was recall 10 books that you read. Okay? And so everybody's asked to, instead of the 10 Commandments, 10 books that you read, try to write down 10 titles. Did they cheat or not cheat? They still cheated. They went right back up to 7 again. Okay? Then the next experiment was not the 10 Commandments, not the 10 books, your personal honor code. Do you have a personal honor code? I mean, and maybe you do, maybe you don't. I remember Pirates of the Caribbean, they had the pirate code, which wasn't much of a code. But anyway, so you had your personal honor code you were supposed to try to write down. What do you think happened? No cheating. Now, the next experiment was see if he could get people to cheat more. And so what do you think he did? Instead of spending 5 minutes writing your 10 Commandments or 10 books that you wrote, your personal honor code, he exposed people to other people cheating. He exposed people to people getting over, getting more. I don't know exactly how he did that, but he set people up to see a bad example. Then he gave them the test, and what do you think happened? Even more cheating. So the bad example immediately had an effect on them, and they allowed themselves, in the face of a bad example, to be the bad steward with the bad boss. And if he can rip people off, then what? Then I can rip him off. And so, my brothers and sisters, what does this tell us? This tells us that we need to be reminded of our personal honor code. And our personal honor code is that we are disciples of Jesus Christ, that we are followers of the way and the truth and the life. And our personal honor code is the 10 Commandments. Our personal honor code is the Beatitudes. You know, sometimes they ask people, what is your personal honor code? And people are like, I don't know. What is that? But as Christians, it's given to us. We don't lie. We don't steal. We don't cheat. We don't commit adultery. We honor God. We honor our parents. That is the code. That is the law that is written into the heart of us. But we have to be reminded of it, or it doesn't do us any good. I'm sure there were plenty of Christians who are getting their extra $3, okay, until he said, hey, you got to think about this a minute. To be reminded with a daily examination of our life. To be reminded by coming to church, even when we don't feel like it, even when the saints are on, to come to church and to pray. And what about mom and dad? What about being a good example to your children? You that are coaches and teachers, How much cheating do you tolerate? My brothers and sisters, we have a horrible boss with a bad employee, and they're stealing. And Jesus says, if you're trustworthy with money, you'll get even greater things. See, if you're trustworthy with money, you'll get spiritual riches. But if you're not trustworthy with money, who's going to give you spiritual riches? You're not going to get them. That's the true wealth that Jesus is talking about. I don't care if it's $10 or $1 billion, it's still insignificant compared to spiritual riches. And if you're not honest with material things, you're not going to be a good steward of the Holy Spirit. And so Jesus says we must be honest in small things and in great things. And this experiment reminds us of what Jesus tells us. Do this in memory of me. So, my brothers and sisters, it's a challenging gospel. It's a difficult gospel. But at the same time, it boils down to a couple of pretty simple principles. To be honest with money, to be honest in small things, and we will have spiritual wealth. And if we surround ourselves with good examples, we're much more likely to be the people we want to be, and our children will be what example we set for them, or our parishioners, or our neighbors. So let's all strive. There's no allowable cheating, lying as a Christian. Let us all strive to be honest in great things and in the small things.